So I'm just thrilled this evening to have a very dear friend and colleague, my good friend Shawn Leth. And Shawn and I have been friends for, I think, close to 30 years. She's been an exercise physiologist at Mayo, and she's worked the majority of her career in cardiac rehab and in education, and has done, excuse me, here's one more person. And so throughout her career, she's really always been educating and teaching patients more about their hearts and how to take care of themselves. And Shawn has spoken nationally and internationally on all aspects of heart disease, on coaching, on motivational interviewing. I've had the pleasure of doing some fun presentations with her. So tonight she's going to talk to us, with this being February Heart Month, she's going to talk to us about keeping our hearts healthy.
Yeah, as Kathy said, when she invited me and we knew it was going to be Heart Month, we kind of talked about focusing on heart disease. It's nice to see everybody wearing red. Kathy almost always wears red, so I had to break out mine this evening. But I just thought we would focus a little bit on more of action steps that we can take, thinking back to our verse on how to guard our heart. But before we get into that, I'll just share some real high-level information just on risk factors, just to kind of get us back into this thought process and knowing what your risk factors are. So as Kathy said with the verse, and thank you for sharing some of the other information related to the verse, you know, our bodies are a temple to Christ, right? And so it really is our job to take care of our bodies and be mindful of what we're doing to make sure that we are as healthy as we can be. So I think if I just hit awesome. So again, just to reiterate, the verse for this evening was above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And as Kathy was reading some of those sayings on this verse from other authors, it made me again think that the main intent, in my opinion, of this verse is really emotional and spiritual, right? What are we watching? What are we seeing? What are we listening to? It affects what we speak out. But I would argue that it also encompasses our physical heart, something that we may not think of when we first read that verse. We need to guard our heart from internal and external forces, both what we're seeing and hearing and reading, but also what are we putting into it, and how are we working our body in terms of exercise. So I encourage us to keep that in the back of their mind as we go through this. And just to remind everybody, the heart is the primary organ that keeps our body thriving, living. Its job is to pump blood and oxygen throughout the body. So all of our organs, our cells, everything. In fact, it pumps about 2,000 gallons of blood a day. So it is a working machine for sure. So just, I'm hoping this is a review for most people. If it's not, for sure, you want to talk to your primary doctor or your primary care provider to make sure that you know your risk factors. But the important thing to remember is there's some we can't control and some we can. And those we can't obviously are our age, whether or not we were born a male, and our family history. Things we can control are blood pressure, our cholesterol, our sugar levels or diabetes, smoking, obesity, whether or not we do any exercise. Those are all things that we can control. And that's kind of the focus of tonight's talk. So related to the risk factors is knowing your numbers. And there's this great initiative that American Heart has put out. It's called Life's Essential 8. And it goes through what numbers you need to know about your own risk for heart disease. And the top 4, in my opinion, I've listed here: blood pressure. The general population should be under 120 over 80. Again, take this with a grain of salt, not really, but you know, this is kind of based on the general population. So if you have heart disease already, or if you're diabetic, or if you have other health conditions, your recommendations will be different. Okay, so I defer you back to your primary provider to find out actually what those numbers should be. The general total cholesterol for most people should be under 200. I don't have on here the breakdown of cholesterol. There's another type of cholesterol called your HDL, which are the good guys. We want the HDL to be as high as we can possibly get it. And the reason I mention that is because in a little bit, we're going to be talking about exercise. And exercise independently can raise our HDL. So that's just another plug for being active. Blood sugar, general blood sugar should be under 100 for most people. And your body mass index, or your BMI, which is just a calculation based off your height and your weight. The general BMI guidelines are between 19 and 25. Again, that's going to vary. Now, there's a little bit of controversy with using BMI as a marker for heart disease, because you could have somebody of normal BMI, but they might be frail. They might not have any muscle mass. Likewise, you could have somebody who's overweight according to BMI, but they're all muscle. They're very bulky. Okay, so that kind of skews things. Another thing we use is waist circumference. Traditionally, the apple shape, kind of the round, is generally more at risk than the pear shape. That's why women tend to be protected until we reach menopause, because we tend to have, the pear shape versus the apple shape. But again, this is something you want to talk to your primary provider about and know exactly where you sit with your numbers related to your risk factors. So taking action, going back to our verse, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Another definition of guard your heart is to protect against damage or harm, right? So to protect our organ heart, we can do some things. We can take some action to do that. Eating healthy, moving more, not smoking, improving our sleep, managing stress. Those are all things that we can do, steps we can take to improve our heart health. So I thought we'd start with eating. Eating healthy, it's easier said than done sometimes. Right now we've got all the Valentine candy out and the chocolates coming out. That makes it a little bit more challenging. But the good news is that simple changes go a long way, right? We're not asking you totally to change your whole diet. That would be very unrealistic. But to start being mindful of what you're choosing every day. When you go to the grocery store, maybe pay a little more attention to those labels and choosing healthier things. I love the rainbow. I have found this has been very beneficial when I've been counseling patients in the past, to encourage them to eat the rainbow every day. When you're choosing your menu planning or you're going to the grocery store, buy from the rainbow. Get some red fruits and vegetables, get yellow, get purple. They all have different nutrients and macronutrients and micronutrients, vitamins and minerals that support our bodies in more ways than just our heart health. Okay, so that's a easy thing to think about when you go to the grocery store. Choose whole grains and legumes. You notice there isn't a whole lot of white on the rainbow. Now, onions, cauliflower, obviously there's some good white fruits and vegetables. But I like to think of the carbohydrates as the whites as being not the best choices. So think of your white potatoes, your big old Idaho potato. It's okay once in a while, but perhaps sometimes you might want to substitute a sweet potato or those little Yukon Golds. Actually, the Yukon Golds have less starch, less carbs than the big Idaho potatoes. So that's a healthier option. The little mini red potatoes, I think, are scrumptious, different flavor. So experiment. Brown rice instead of white rice. And I loved it when Chipotle had you can choose brown rice over the white rice. Some dishes, it's a little bit harder to substitute the brown rice because it just either texture or you may not like it as much. You can mix it half and half or mix some couscous or something like that in it. There's some awesome boxed, what do you call those, Kathy? Like rice-a-roni, but it's not rice-a-roni. But it's like a blend of rice and couscous and stuff like that. And I really enjoy that. Okay, good, yeah. Limit fatty cuts of meat. So instead of the 12-ounce ribeye that tastes so good because all the marbled fat in it, maybe get the 3 or 4-ounce tenderloin, right? So not that you can never have a ribeye again, but that's going to be for a special occasion. You're going to choose the lean meats over that. Incorporating fish or seafood more into your week. In the summer, I think Minnesotans like to grill. There's nothing better than a fillet of fish on the grill. I can tell you that. Same with chicken and pork. There's leaner cuts that you can choose. Your ground beef, try to get the leaner cuts. And the salt shaker. I don't know how many of you use a lot of salt when you prepare foods, but my advice to most of the patients is if they have a salt shaker sitting on the table, get rid of it, because that's a lot of extra salt and sodium that you don't need. It'll take a while for your taste buds to get used to not having the salt because it's so overpowering. But if you just get rid of it and really incorporate fresh herbs and seasonings, garlic, onion, the natural flavors from perhaps chopped vegetables, you'll notice that your taste buds start to change and you pick up on the different flavors that are in the foods.
Shawn, can I just add, one of
Yeah.
the greatest pearls I ever heard was the only 3 things that don't have salt in them naturally are rice, natural rice, fresh fruit, and honey. Everything we take in, all the vegetables have some salt in them. And so that really,
Those of you on Zoom, could you hear Kathy's comment?
No.
No. So she just mentioned that there's 3 foods in their natural elements that don't have salt, and that's rice, honey,
and fresh fruit.
and fresh fruit. So, and a lot of our processed foods, particularly canned foods, are loaded with sodium. So if you're somebody with high blood pressure, heart failure, that is a huge caution. You really want to stay away from the canned produce. And in fact, frozen vegetables generally are better tasting and more nutritious than the canned produce because they're usually flash frozen. So all the nutrients are still in there and they don't have the added salt from the liquid that's in there. And then obviously limit sugar. And, I remember back in the late 80s, 90s, everything was low fat, no eggs, low fat, low fat, low fat. And we started reducing the fat, but we added a ton of sugar to everything to make it taste good. So now we're like, oh my gosh, we got to look at the sugar. And I just had this conversation with my mom a couple months ago when you're buying like sour cream, for example. She's all about, oh, I need to get low fat. I'm like, you're diabetic, Mom. Read the label. There's so much sugar in the low fat. She was better off getting the regular fat sour cream because it had less sugar. So those are those little nuances that you really need to pay attention to. And that's why it's important to know what your numbers are, right? Are you pre-diabetic? Are you sitting right on that borderline? You're not diabetic yet, but you're right on that border. So those are some things you kind of want to watch for. Sweets, if you got a hankering for, sweets, desserts. I grew up in an era where we had dessert every night for supper. That's part of the farm culture, right? There was cake and ice cream or pie or something. Well, perhaps one night you could have some fresh berries and a little whipped cream or something to start breaking that habit and have fruit as your dessert.
I don't know if you want to stop for questions. There might be a few in this area, or wait till the end, whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah, let's wait till the end. I should mention, we are very fortunate to have Hy-Vee grocery stores in the area, and they staff dietitians. So if you ever have questions about anything in the store, just stop and ask to see if the dietitian is working. You can also, at least you used to be able to, make appointments with them, and they would actually walk you through the store and kind of show you, okay, help you read some labels. This is good, this is not so good, that sort of thing. I would be remiss if we did not talk about portion sizes. As Americans, we tend to overeat. We love our food. Fun fact, back in the 60s, the average size of a dinner plate was about 8.5 inches. How big do you think a dinner plate is now if you went and bought a set of dishes?
Well, could you say, Jerry?
9 or 10.
Well, it's more. It's 12 actually.
Is it?
Yeah, it's crazy. So no wonder we have trouble with obesity, right? We're just eating more. So one thing you might want to do is take a look at your dishes when you get home, because our mind is powerful, right? If we see a plate and it's maybe 2/3 full of food, we think, oh, there's room for more, even though we have the correct amount on there, right? Versus if you have a luncheon sized plate, 9 or 10-inch plate, and it's the same amount of food on that plate, but it's full, your brain automatically is thinking, this is going to be awesome. It's going to satisfy me. I won't need any more. It's funny how our brain works. So just something to think about. This is also a nice tool, choosemyplate.gov. This is a great visual aid. And I think it works really nice when you go out to eat, right? And they bring you that food. Divide your plate in half. On the right, you've got grains and protein. Almost 50-50, not quite. Remember, protein, I guess I didn't really mention actual serving sizes, but protein is about 3 ounces. It's not very often you find a 3-ounce steak in a restaurant, or a 3-ounce chicken breast for that matter. They're even larger. It's about a deck of cards, okay? And then vegetables, fruit on the other side, obviously more vegetables than fruits. Fruits are great for us, but they still have that natural sugar, so there's more calories there. But that's just a kind of a quick look. And if you keep that in the back of your mind when you go out to eat, and they bring you all your food, maybe ask for a to-go container right away and take half that steak or chicken and half of that huge Idaho potato and take it home. And that's going to be lunch tomorrow.
We're glad to eat. Most of the time we share.
Share a meal. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's economical too. So again, these recommendations are, for the general population. If you have diabetes or any other health conditions where you need to modify your diet accordingly, but for sure, follow those guidelines. Move more. I want to introduce you to Frankie and Ripley. Frankie is our dog on the right. He's a golden doodle. And then Ripley is in the forefront, and that's my grand dog, whom I don't get to see very often because he's out in Massachusetts. Our bodies were made to move, right? Due to the changes in our careers, though, shift in society, we don't move much anymore. We're not outside laboring in the fields. We're not doing as much work in the factories and whatnot because of automation. The general recommendations for the population is to get 150 minutes of aerobic exercise in a week. So like 5 days a week for about a half hour, moderate to brisk walk, okay? Or ride your bike or swim or whatever it is you do. Additionally, we should be doing some strength training, work our muscles a couple days a week, okay? That helps us from becoming frail as we get older. Now, even if you exercise, get your 150 minutes in a week, you still want to be active during the week, right? You want to do some movement every day. I think for a while, there was kind of a negative connotation about recreational activities, thinking it wasn't as important as aerobic exercise, but it is. We want you to do things you enjoy. Do you like to play golf? Great, go out and play golf. Ideally, you're walking and not riding a cart, but if you have mobility issues and arthritis, obviously you're going to need to, ride the cart to get around the course. Pickleball has become popular. Playing with your grandkids, gardening, going for a walk. We've got some great places around Rochester to go walk and enjoy nature. That's also important. It's most important that you find something you enjoy and do it on a consistent basis. It's the Lenten season. A group of friends of mine are doing this challenge called Walk a Mile with Jesus. I don't know, has anybody seen it on Facebook? It's been out there. So the challenge is to walk a mile every day, but spend that time walking with Jesus. So either praying, listening to worship music, I've downloaded some podcasts that my girlfriends recommended. So I've been listening to some different Christian podcasts, prayer, whatever it is. I like it because I get 2 bangs for my buck, right? Work on my spiritual health and my physical health. So, moving our bodies, exercising, being physically active helps with those risk factors that we talked about at the beginning, helps with your numbers, helps lower your blood pressure, helps decrease the obesity, helps your glucose, your blood sugar levels. Regular exercise even helps our sleep, believe it or not. So, oops, enter. There we go. Just have to touch a little bit on nicotine because it is still a problem, not as much in the United States, which is good. I went to Europe in December and I was surprised how many Europeans still smoke. I mean, I couldn't breathe. It was crazy. The biggest concern that I see right now is the vaping and the e-cigarettes with our teens and our youth, because they're getting sucked into that habit. They're getting addicted to the nicotine, and that's just not good. Kathy can talk to us all night long about smoking cessation, but I think the most important point I wanted to bring home is to you and your friends or loved ones, if you know somebody who smokes and they're at all interested, please encourage them. Nicotine is addictive. They may need help. It's very hard to stop on your own. There's some free resources out there if they want to be a little more private about it. Smokefree.gov is one of them. But I do know both Olmsted Medical Center and Mayo Clinic have specialists to help people with smoking cessation programs. Do you want to add anything to that, Kathy?
No, I guess only that there's 7 products nowadays for people to use, and so many people don't want to ask for help. I don't think you can hear me there.
Mm-hmm.
So many people don't want to ask for help, and yet there's nicotine replacement that's very healthy and fills the receptors in our body so people don't crave nicotine. And so if you know anybody, just tell them that help is there. A lot of people really punish themselves and think they have to quit cold turkey. They can't take any meds or any help. And it's really much better for their heart and their lungs and everything if they do.
So Kathy is just reiterating what I said about, not being ashamed to get help, that there's better medicines out there to help that aren't as dangerous for our bodies. Improve your sleep habits. So there's my grandpuppy again, Ripley. He's the best sleeper of all. And I just love that because he just loves to curl up, and it's like, if I could just fall asleep like that and have everybody else cover me up with a little blanket, right? So why do we even care about our sleep habits? Well, during our sleep is when our body regenerates. That's when our cells repair. It repairs our tissues and our blood vessels. So we need good quality sleep just so our body can kind of regenerate and get ready for the next day. It improves our mood, helps our brain function. I'm sure many of you know, if you have a day where you didn't sleep well the night before, you're just either cranky or you cannot concentrate on work or whatever it is. And it decreases your risk for chronic disease, which is why this is all related to heart disease. So how can we improve our sleep habits? Well, I think the first thing is to look at your environment. Look at the room that you're sleeping in. Most of the recommendations encourage us to have like a dark room, have it cool and quiet. Some of those things you might be able to control, others you may not. Another one is electronics, including TV. It's best not to have the TV in the bedroom. And by electronics, they mainly mean our cell phones now, cell phones and tablets, right? I know I use my cell phone for my alarm clock now. So I find myself sometimes laying in bed after I made sure my alarm is on for the 3rd time. Yeah. And then I start scrolling and it's like, oh, so, maybe put it further away. There's some filters you can get now for your phones to block that blue light. So that may help. The blue light messes with our circadian rhythms and our melatonin production, which help us sleep. Put blockers on, like there's some parental controls to keep yourself from scrolling, I guess. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. So just keep that in mind. Turn it down click the button so the light goes off, and try to refrain from your phone at least 30 minutes, if not an hour, before you go to bed. You know, reading the Bible, maybe doing some prayer meditation might be good. And then try not to eat a large meal, caffeine, alcohol before bed. I know, like, the caffeine affects people differently. And refrain from vigorous exercise before bed. I can't exercise after supper because it keeps me awake until midnight. Sorry, folks. So that's why I like to exercise on my lunch break, because then it kind of wakes me up for the afternoon. So just keep that in mind. Not that it doesn't affect everybody that way. You know, my daughter, maybe it's because she's only 30, she can exercise in the evening and it doesn't impact her at all. But just some tips to think about. And then managing stress. We had a similar sign in our break room at work. On bad days, we'd go in there and bang our head on the wall.
Oh, God.
So just a reminder, not all stress is bad. We need stress to thrive, but when it starts affecting our health negatively, that's when we need to guard our hearts, right? Going back to our Proverbs. Prayer, obviously, is a great one. Mindfulness, just kind of taking a moment, in case you don't know what mindfulness is, but just taking a moment, taking a deep breath and just being aware of what's going on right at that moment. You know, being aware with your senses, what you hear, what do you see, what do you smell, what do you feel, maybe what do you taste, and just be conscious of that and be thankful. Maybe that's a good time just to thank God for the sun shining on your face, or the noise of the traffic that you have a car to drive, you know, things like that. Any type of yoga, Tai Chi, things like that are great. Exercise and physical activity help. Sometimes if you're really just stressed up and you're holding it inside, we get that fight or flight syndrome. We get all these bad catecholamines and stuff in our body, and we got to burn them off. So sometimes you just, you know, go for a walk and you'll feel better. All right, we're wrapping it up. So based on that, what we've just talked about, and reflecting back to our verse, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. I just challenge you to select one thing. If you know what your risk factors are, you know what your numbers are, maybe you just saw the doctor and your blood pressure was a little high. It's like, okay, what could I do to help my blood pressure? Do I need to be more mindful and lower my stress? Maybe I should go for a walk. So that's going to help my stress and my physical activity. Maybe I'm having too much salt in my diet. You know, so just think about that. And I challenge you to pick one thing and to work on it this week. And notice I said pick one thing. Okay. We can't change everything at once. You have to set yourself up for success. So just pick one thing. Try it for a week. If you're successful, woohoo, celebrate it, you know, tell Kathy what you did, or tell your friend, or whatever, you know, have a battle buddy and share that and celebrate that together. And then you can move on to another new challenge the following week. I wanted to end with some of these resources. I mentioned the Life Simple 8, which helps you learn your numbers. There is a Life Simple 8 just for women, I do know. And you have your Go Red shirt on, which is great. Go Red is a campaign by American Heart Association to promote research for women and heart disease, because we finally have realized that women's hearts are different than men's hearts. If you are a woman with heart disease, I do want to put a plug in for another organization called womenheart.org, which provides support for women with heart disease. And then obviously your primary provider. It's important to keep the communications open with your primary provider and make sure that you're getting, treatment for your heart health. So with that, I say thank you. And if we have any questions.
I'm wondering, Sid, would it help if we use the mic as people ask questions? Would that be easier to hear? And would it in fact help if there's people on screen to hold it up to the screen to give them a little more
They would-
volume?
I don't know.
Good try.
We can try it. Are there any questions from the folks online?
Hi, this is Dar.
Jan
Okay.
teaches our exercise program.
Okay.
Just a second.
Darlene has a question. I
Darlene,
think.
go ahead and then we'll go to Jan Rump.
Oh, I'm just thinking of a comment on salt. The traditional table salt that we use is so stripped of anything beneficial that it is a bad product to use. But there is Colima, Colima salt that is harvested in Mexico, and it's when they harvest it, it has all the minerals and things without having the microplastics that come from ocean water and stuff like that. So Colima salt is very tasty and not harmful like the regular table salt.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know if you can hear that, but Darlene's talking about some of the new healthier salts, because table salt has a lot of additives and it isn't always so healthy. And maybe to go online, we used to use coal salt, which I think Morton's made, which was half salt and much more pure than what we get, for table salt. But I'm sure for those of you, we have a few people on screen and in the room that have had heart disease. You may have some suggestions or some things that you'd like to share. Thanks, Darlene. And then we'll go to Jan. Jan Rump's got a question here.
Except for Mike, the rest of us are a little older. So my question is, besides a primary provider, should we also have a heart doctor, cardiologist?
Oh boy, that's a really good question. If you have heart disease, at some point you would have seen a cardiologist. Now, I'm only going to speak of my experience working at Mayo Clinic. They kind of made a shift a few years ago, and I don't know the time frame. It was after a year, maybe Kathy would know, but if the patient was stable, they really deferred that patient back to primary care, unless something happened again, or they started having some symptoms, or the primary care needed the input from the cardiologist. So typically, cardiology is kind of a short-term thing. It's your primary care that sees you long-term. That doesn't mean you can't ever go back to your cardiologist. I mean, I'm a great advocate for being our own great advocate, right? If you have any questions or concerns, you have the right to say, you know what, I really would like to see a cardiologist. I just would feel better. So feel free to request that if you feel like you want it and it would make you feel better.
And then my other question was about your cholesterol level. The last time I was in, it was the total cholesterol, and they were not concerned about the HDL and the ratio anymore. It was all about your total cholesterol. Is that of your opinion also?
Kathy might need your help with this because I haven't been in the practice for a few years. But I know they really are looking at LDL. You're right, not so much the ratio. It's really total and LDL. So
I think it depends on the individuals too. Different care
Kathy,
providers.
why don't you come up here? So
Okay.
for those of you online, the question was about total cholesterol, and that the last time this person saw their doctor, the doctor wasn't concerned about the ratio, the HDL and total cholesterol ratio.
And as Shawn says, I think the ideal hope for care would be that everybody has a good primary care provider. And they would oversee and then send you to the specialist. And as we all know, sometimes it's difficult to get into cardiology. But if it's something you need, and you correct me here, but I think the Women's Heart Clinic at Mayo took self-referral, and I think they still do.
I think so too.
So if a woman, for instance, feels they need a cardiologist, they can self-refer if their internist wouldn't for whatever reason. But to answer the cholesterol question, I mean, again, it's so personal to different providers. I still feel it's important for you to know your whole panel. Your total, your healthy, H for healthy cholesterol, HDL, and L for lousy is what I tell people. And your triglycerides, because that's your sugar levels. We used to be concerned about ratio. We don't talk about that so much anymore if the healthy cholesterol and the LDL are where they should be. But I don't know, my feeling is that you should know the breakdown. And
Yeah, for sure.
And most of the colleagues I've worked with, well, how about some of you that have had heart disease? Are you willing to share? When you have a panel done, a cholesterol or a lipid panel, are they telling you your total, your good cholesterol, your bad cholesterol?
Well, when I go to Mayo, I have a sheet that, labels everything. And
Elnora just
It
said when
looks
she
like
goes
there's
to
a
cholesterol,
comment.
yeah, there'll be a comment here.
too.
When Elnora goes to Mayo, they give her a sheet and breakdown. And when you look at your lab results, it's all there. Everything's
it's on
there.
your portal.
It's on your portal, yeah. And you should always have the breakdown. I've never seen just total.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jen. Just a second, Dolores. We'll get back to you here.
Okay.
I guess I forgot to mention, this is in conjunction with whether or not you should be put on a statin or not. And that was
Very good reason. I mean, you need to
Yeah.
know your whole panel if you're going to be put on a statin.
Right.
And you
Right.
folks, I know some of you here on statins, that's a cholesterol lowering medication.
Yeah.
I always add for people that the other really good benefit of statins is it puts caps on the plaques in the vessels. If there are, hardening of the arteries developing, it puts a cap so they can't rupture as easily. So that's a real safety of those too. But you have a right to know the panel. Here, Dolores has a comment. Go ahead, Dolores.
Well, as an Olmsted medical patient, I have the portal and we get all the lab results. And of course, I do what I shouldn't be doing. And when there's something I don't understand, I Google it. Well, you can get all kinds of things off of Google, so just don't do that. Go.
She's saying don't depend on Dr. Google over a health provider. But she's at Olmsted and she said she gets the panel results as well.
So again, these
Absolutely.
resources, these are, if you Google and find those, that's good. American Heart, this Heart Truth, Life Simple 8, that information is out there.
Yes.
Because
But
if you have heart disease, they're going to want your cholesterol levels different than somebody who doesn't have heart disease. Just like a diabetic person is going to have different guidelines. So that's why I tried to gear this just to the general population, and based on your individual health record, the results, the targets that they're going to want you might be slightly different.
Oh, I was just going to say, when you were talking about the salt,
Yeah.
we don't eat salt. We haven't for years. Don't even miss it anymore.
Yeah.
And now when we eat something that's got quite a bit of salt, we can't hardly eat it.
Yeah. So another comment about salt, as soon as you stop using it, your taste buds change. And then when you do go out to eat or something, you can tell when they've salted a lot of things. I guess I was fortunate in a way. Growing up, my grandfather was widowed and ate a lot of his meals with us. In fact, that's how I got into cardiac rehab. He had bypass surgery. And so I was home from college and drove him down to rehab. And that's how I got introduced to it. But obviously my mom would cook dinner. And so we went saltless. And I'm so glad, because I don't have to worry about that. And I don't like a lot of salt on my foods. I love the natural flavors that you get from just in the vegetables stuff. Roasted vegetables are the bomb, people. If you've not roasted vegetables, I don't like Brussels sprouts, but I'll eat them if they're roasted.
And that's a great addition when we're talking about the rainbow of foods.
Yeah.
Roasting them on the grill in the summer or in the oven there with a little olive oil.
Yeah, you can buy these little frozen packages that have like mixed vegetables, and I just season them with a little olive oil and whatever seasoning I'm hankering that day, throw them in the oven. Oh, it's awesome.
Well, I was gonna say, I use a lot of lemon pepper
Yep.
and I never liked it before. And now I've started using it. My husband loved it and I didn't like it then. And now I use it, but it depends
Yeah.
on, there's different ones that have
Sure.
more lemon or
Yes.
something. And you can get it without salt in it.
Yep. Good.
It's like Dolores said, she's on screen, Sean. But,
Yep.
She recently had reason to really watch her diet, and reading labels seems like such a chore in the beginning. But once you learn about it, it's just a way of life. And it really helps us be healthier eaters.
Yeah,
It
Kathy
takes
was
work.
just mentioning that reading labels, once you start and you understand it, it's a lot easier.
I must admit that when I started reading the labels, I was appalled
Yep.
at the amount of nasty things that we're eating, not even thinking about it.
Right. So she was just saying when she first started reading the labels, you're all of a sudden you're aware of everything else that's in some of our foods that is not good for us. So,
All the monosodium and glutamate and all the additives and
yep. So fresh, frozen. Any other questions?
I was told in rehab that it takes 28 days to change your, like, salt.
Yeah.
If you don't eat salt for 28 days, then you've got it made.
Yep. So it takes 28 days for your taste buds to get used to not salt.
Just have to not
Yeah.
think about it.
I remember one of our dietitians telling us once that if there's something you don't like and you're trying to learn to like it, try it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like it, well, then give up. Because you
Try
probably will
something
never
3
like it.
times before you give up. Because it takes
And
a
I've
couple
always
times.
wanted to try salmon. I never liked salmon. And they
Oh,
served it in the St. Mary's cafeteria with the fruit relish. And first time I could hardly handle it. Second time it was a little better. And by the third time I could hardly wait for them to serve it.
so Kathy was just giving an example of salmon, how she didn't like salmon, but after the 3rd time in the cafeteria of all places,
Yeah, in the St. Mary's
they
cafeteria.
had a fruit relish to go
But a
with it.
fruit relish. It was kind of peppers, green and yellow peppers and fruit. It was an interesting
Yeah.
combination.
Probably pineapple or mango. Mango salsa. It's awesome.
Other questions
Alright.
on screen? I want to take a second before we thank Sean and see if there's any final questions to just talk about who all is on the screen tonight. So we've got Dot Springer on screen, Dolores McGilvery, Paula Muth, Darlene Polk, Olivia Reddick, Herb and Betty Mueller, Darlene Thompson, Chris Otto, and Karen Meyer. So we've got a good range of you on screen. Here in the room, we've got Mike Sonneman, Jan Rump, Ruth Hine, Elnora Hildestad, Vicky Root, and then Lee Noss and Jerry Maxwell Noss. So we've got a great crowd. And Sid, thank heaven, Sid Thompson, our AV expert, is filming us. So we've got a little time. If you have any other questions, we sure can address them.
I just want to say thank you very much for all the quality information that was given.
Thank you, Chris. Chris Otto just said she wanted to thank Sean for all the quality information. Any other comments or things you've experienced? And there's a wealth of information, like she said, AmericanHeart.org has a plethora of information just going out there on the web. But also we caution you, please don't use WebMD too much, because a lot of people turn to that for everything, and there is some misinformation. We'd rather have you check with your primary care provider if it's ever possible. There was one statement I wanted to share with you before I ask once more if there are any questions. When I was doing this meditation on Proverbs 4, it said that we should also go to Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. And in that chapter, it says, is our heart set on the right things? Is it set on where Christ is? So it's sort of the challenge beyond what we talked about tonight, that once we start to live and care for ourselves, are we focused on the right things? And
That's a good one.
yeah, Colossians chapter 3, verse 1, is our heart set on things about where Christ is in our life? Good challenge. Any other last minute questions? We thank you all so much. We're going to have a speaker in March, God willing. We had, like I said, we had a meeting last month with wonderful ideas from so many of you, and we're just trying to see who's available which month. So hopefully we'll have speakers each month till May. It's always the second Monday, as you all know, because you're our loyal people here. And we'll try to have somebody different. And if you have any topics or speakers you'd like to hear about, please let us know. And if that's all we have tonight, could we end together with the Lord's Prayer? We'll hear a lot of different voices, but that's okay. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Give us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Thanks, everyone. Blessings. Stay healthy now.
Thank you, Dawn.
And we'll see you in March, I hope.
All right, thanks, Kathy.
Thank you all.